Hello and welcome to the Raw review here on Wrestling with Regret. This week's video opens up on a bit of a sad note for the channel. After talking it over with her this weekend, it's been determined that Alex, the self-proclaimed Queen of the Ring, will no longer be hosting the SmackDown review here on this channel. She told me she just didn't have it in her heart anymore to watch and review WWE content on a regular basis. And, you know, considering all the sad goings on with the releases and everything and just how, you know, the general state of the company right now, I don't blame her for that. So I'm sad to see her go. She will be missed on this channel. I think she did a great job hosting the SmackDown review every week since October when the show moved over to Fox. If you do want to continue to follow her on her channel, I have the link to that here in the description here. I don't see that this being the end of her input on this channel, though. I'd love to do some more collaborative work with her in the future. In fact, for the first time, we'll actually be sharing some screen time together on Parts Fun Known for the next Quizzlemania happening Wednesday afternoon / evening / night, depending on where you live in the world. We'll actually be competing against each other for some wrestling trivia. So look forward to that happening on Wednesday. But yeah, sad to see Alex leaving the channel. And starting this week, I will be hosting the SmackDown review for the foreseeable future. And so we'll just see how long I can put up with that, reviewing 3 or 4 shows a week. But in the meantime, we're just going to do the Raw stuff right now. Let's get into it. The show opens up with the champion Drew McIntyre in the ring. He says he heard it's lonely at the top, but it turns out that's a lie because according to him, it's very crowded at the top these days. He calls out Seth Rollins for what happened last week when he jumped him at the very end of the show. He says he needs to defend his championship against Seth to prove his worth as champion, so he makes a challenge to Seth for the title at Money in the Bank. He's interrupted by Angel Garza, Zelina Vega, and Austin Theory. Zelina begins to talk some mess to Drew, but it's a distraction to allow Andrade to jump Drew, but that backfires pretty quickly. Drew hits Andrade with not 1, but 2 Claymores back-to-back. And after the first one, Zelina keeps telling Theory and Garza to run in the ring, and they just don't want any, they don't want nothing to do with him, which is pretty funny. But yeah, so Drew easily dispatches of Andrade as that's the opening segment there. And boy, this is not going to be the end of Drew just stomping the dicks in of Theory and Garza and Andrade on the night. The first match of the night is a Money in the Bank qualifier as Aleister Black takes on Austin Theory, and Zelina Vega is doing commentary for this. Now, this is a bit of fun for me because if you followed the Raw review for any length of time, then you know that I would always point out when there was always an Aleister Black segment and Zelina Vega segment, always kind of adjacent to each other. That was always a thing for a while. Felt like for months they would always be one after the other in some kind of order. Well, now, for the first time, I believe, you've got the two of them actually sharing screen time together since NXT, so finally we get some overlap. That being said, very good match, very competitive, and easily Austin Theory's best showing on Raw since getting called up from NXT several weeks ago, the week before WrestleMania, in fact. Ultimately, Aleister wins the Black Mass, and then afterward he cuts a promo saying he's going to turn every floor of the corporate headquarters into his opponent's personal hell. And let's talk about that for a second, because they announced over the weekend that both the Money in the Bank matches are going to take place at Titan Towers in Stamford, and they're going to start wrestling on the bottom floor, fight their way up to the roof of the building where the ladders will be there, the belts will be suspended. I will give WWE credit because it feels like almost every time their back's up against the wall and they have to make some insurmountable change due to some outside influence, they're usually able to come through in the clutch and come up with something that's at least unique and makes you want to watch. I want to see how a multi-story battle for the Money in the Bank is going to go. Like we saw at 2-Night WrestleMania. How are they going to do a 2-Night WrestleMania? How are they going to do WrestleMania in an empty building with matches in the can? We saw how they did that to pretty good success, especially the stuff that was like out there, like the Boneyard match and like the Firefly Funhouse match. So when given the opportunity to do something this unique with the concept of Money in the Bank, that elevates it in a really interesting way, no pun intended, but it makes you really want to see what it's going to look like. Up next, Shayna Baszler taking on Indi Hartwell from NXT. Indi puts up a bit of a fight, but much like the match last week with Sarah Logan, Shayna easily destroys her opponent, stomps in the arm, and allegedly breaks it. The referee throws out the match and awards it to Shayna. Then afterwards, Shayna brings out a ladder and continues to destroy Indi's arm with it. And just more of those ineffective referees, because like literally the referee and the trainers are in the ring and they're waving off Shayna while they're on the outside of the ring. Like you can't just like jump in between them. Like why are the referees so feckless and ineffective when they're trying to stop these horrible post-match beatdowns. Anyway, this segment made Baszler look like a total evil monster, just doing that kind of damage because she can, and it's like not breaking the rules. I feel like in a bubble where she's not like actively feuding with Becky Lynch or like having to wrestle her at this point, I think it makes Baszler look insanely good and really just dangerous. And it's just more that how is Becky inevitably going to ward off the attack of this much fiercer Shayna Baszler than before? Cedric Alexander and Ricochet team up against Brendan Vink and Shane Thorne, who's looking a bit like Chris Candido with the bleached blonde hair, although he shares no other physical attributes to Candido at all. Anyway, it's a blink and you miss it match, but I was really impressed throughout like how Rico and Cedric were able to kind of bust out these like double team moves or like 2-on-1 things when it was like one of them against the two of their opponents. Ultimately, it's a recoil into the lumbar check on Thorne for Cedric and Ricochet to win. Good stuff, and I want to see more things from this tag team. The Kabuki Warriors cut a promo backstage. They're not at all concerned about Kairi's chances with Nia Jax in the rematch coming up next. Then we see Bobby Lashley in the gym of the Performance Center, and he visibly beckons his wife Lana to come into the shot. So Lashley says he's going to warm up and flip a tire. Cool. See you then. We have that rematch now as Nia Jax takes on Kairi Sane. Nia beat Kairi in the qualifier match last week here. As the match begins, we see another shot of Asuka yelling at the monitor, cheering Kairi on. I just want Asuka to do that like every match, whether Kairi's involved or not. Anyway, the big thing with this match people keep talking about is one point where Kairi goes for a sunset flip takedown and Nia just like no-sells it, which was pretty funny because of the size difference. But then Nia picks up Kairi, has her in like a double choke hold, and is supposed to like dump her into the corner, but she shorts her by like a foot or two, and so Kairi's like falls on her ass. It's a really like not good fall at all. Whatever the opposite of good is, that is what the fall that Kairi took here was. And so then Nia ultimately wins the match with Samoan drop. Look, every week that Nia doesn't hurt somebody or fuck something up is a blessing, and I admit I've been giving her the benefit of the doubt for probably a lot longer than I had any right to. But just seeing this after all this time away, and she's just back to the same old tricks and same things that pissed so many people off in the years leading up to this, how many more chances is Nia Jax going to get before they finally pull the plug on her, or they say, you know, you gotta like cut the sloppiness down? At what point are they gonna reach that? I just feel it's like she's just back to the same thing she was. Like if Nia Jax is like fully focused and doesn't botch and just like commits to it, I'm all for that. I think when Nia is on, she's really good. But she's not on all the time. She's off a lot of the time, like this one. I don't want to see that anymore. Seth Rollins looks to be cutting a promo in his house with zero production value thrown in, but I thought the cherry was sitting on was interesting though. Seth basically says that he and Drew have all these similarities, how they've won the championship, and how they both beat Brock Lesnar in the main event of WrestleMania. But I think it's funny they use footage of Seth beating Brock at Mania 35, which was in fact the first match of the show. Seth says that now more than ever, he needs to win the championship. He doesn't want to win the championship, he needs to, because WWE needs a leader and he feels he can do that. I thought it was a solid promo. I thought it was good stuff, but I just give him some lights. Give him a mic or something, and give him a better camera than what the cell phone that they shot with. Well, the quarantine has forced a lot of people to shoot some strange content these days, because up next we see the Viking Raiders doing their version of Carpool Karaoke. They're driving around in their Viking helmet gimmicks, they're doing a chant, Ivar's eating a turkey leg, and that was it. Great. I want to buy a ticket and see these guys in action. What the fuck was that? That was just so off-brand for them, and also hearing them talk and do that chant makes me realize, wow, they have the least intimidating voices to go along with their bodies. It's like, man, those guys in Lashley should form a super group of voices that don't match their physiques, because that, I think, killed them. I mean, I don't know what I was expecting, but that was weird. That was weird stuff, man. I was not a fan. Another Money in the Bank qualifier as MVP takes on Apollo Crews. MVP on the mic before the match, putting over Apollo a lot, but then hits like some backhanded compliments near the end there. As the match goes on, one of my favorite parts is MVP, like he's beating down Crews, and with every like swing of his fist, he's name dropping the wrestlers he's beaten in the years past. At one point, MVP even hits the Playmaker, which by the way is one of the worst finishes of all time, but Crews kicks out of it, makes a fiery comeback, and he hits a stalling sit-out powerbomb to win the match and advance. And they said on commentary it's the biggest win of Apollo's career, and like, yeah, it kind of is. Feels crazy that in the last like 4 years we finally reached that point. I said a couple weeks ago, I will believe an Apollo Crews push when I see an Apollo Crews push. This is the closest thing to a push I've ever seen for Apollo Crews since he came up from NXT. So we can only see where he goes from here. It can only go up, right? Backstage, Ruby Riott's being interviewed in preparation for her match with Liv Morgan, and Ruby talks about the Riott Squad and how I had double shoulder surgery because I had to carry both Liv Morgan and Sarah Logan the entire time. And this was not the first time that they name dropped Sarah Logan on this show. In the match with Shayna Baszler, they showed the recap of her getting her arm broken by Shayna then last week. And when that happened, I'm like, okay, well, I don't see what the problem with that is because, you know, they have to bring her up practically, right? I mean, it just happened. It'd be weird to bring up that highlight and not mention the opponent by name. But then when Ruby cuts this whole promo about the Riott Squad and they show pictures of the squad together, I did think that was kind of weird. And people made a bit of a rumbling about that online, like the discussion there. So, like, does it mean Sarah's coming back? Like, who knows? I thought that was interesting. The first time I thought, okay, that can be dismissed. But when they bring it up a second time, like, man, maybe she is just furloughed and maybe she will come back at some point. But really, who knows? I was surprised they did that. We go to that match now, Riott versus Morgan. The story here is that Ruby, early on, is very dominant toward Liv here. She's trying to prove that, you know, Liv is still the baby that she's always been. She's not grown up. She's not on her own yet. And so she's beating down Liv early on, getting a little overconfident, though. At one point, she goes, hits the ropes, and Liv runs right after her, hits the flatliner from the ropes out of nowhere to win. It's a bit of an upset there, beating Ruby. And yeah, I mean, I'm just curious to know where Liv goes, and for that matter, where Ruby goes from here in terms of the women's scene. Because if this is the end of, you know, the Riott Squad as we know it, and like they've done their last bit of blow off and they move on, curious to see where they go. We go back to Lashley in the gym. He ends up flipping that one tire, but can he flip a bigger tire? Find out later. In your last Money in the Bank qualifier, Murphy takes on Rey Mysterio. I love the story in this match because early on, Murphy calls Rey an old man, and the whole thing is Rey trying to prove himself. And this, you know, this is a great back and forth match. These guys really work all over the place, in the ring, out of the ring. The big story here is a lot of the offense is revolving around Rey's injured hand during the matchup here. Ultimately, Rey hits the Canadian Destroyer and a 619 to win and go on to the Money in the Bank match. And yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Hadn't seen Murphy in several weeks, so good to see him back in action here. And a match like with this against Rey, I think it makes them both look great. Angel Garza and Zelina Vega cutting a promo backstage. Zelina says that even though Andrade and Austin Theory got beaten up tonight, so far all is going according to plan, and nothing to see here. Angel then hits on Charlie Caruso on the way out. We then go to our next match. Charlotte Flair in her first match back since winning the NXT Women's Championship at WrestleMania, going against Kayden Carter of NXT. Short and sweet matchup here. Charlotte talks major trash to Kayden throughout before putting her in the figure eight to win. I know that people have their druthers about Charlotte being the champion of NXT and everything and winning another title and whatnot, but the optimist in me believes there can be some good coming from this because the whole story here is that Charlotte has this disdain and contempt for the NXT Women's division. She is above them, and so the whole story is, oh, she's going to swing by NXT and just see how the kids are doing, and she wants to kind of give back and everything. And so there's this whole narrative they're pushing that Charlotte doesn't believe she's the NXT is not worthy of her. It feels very reminiscent of the whole Brock Lesnar thing going on they had for a while. And so when Charlotte inevitably loses to somebody, it should hopefully make a star out of that person, out of the next champion. Will it be Rhea Ripley? Will it be somebody else? Time will tell, but hopefully they can pull it off and actually make a star out of whoever beats Charlotte. We get our final segment with Lashley and his friend, Population Tire. It's a 450-pound tire. He is finally able to lift it and flip it after a couple of attempts, and then Lana cheers him on. Lashley says, that's the kind of strength that everyone here needs to fear. Yes, Lashley, we know. You're a strong boy. This was a weird, very interesting way of getting Lashley over, and it really went in a direction I didn't think it was going to go. I just assumed from the beginning, oh, Lana's going to do something to distract Lashley and cost it, and it prevents him from flipping the tire, and ooh, he'll be mad at her again. But that didn't really happen. Like, she was just being really supportive of him, and it was kind of like a red herring in that respect from the beginning, where she was like not going along with the plan and kind of like coming in late. So yeah, it was interesting, was the best way to describe it. Like, yeah, Lashley's a strong boy. I get it. What else? Andrade takes on Akira Tozawa in a short but fairly competitive matchup here. Despite taking 2 claymores at the top of the night, Andrade is able to beat Akira clean with the hammerlock DDT off the top rope. And then as he and Zelina Vega are celebrating on the ramp, out come the Street Profits, and they do their dance on the announce table. And after the break, they introduce Bianca Belair for her matchup with Santana Garrett. And so that match happens, but you really can't pay attention to what's going on in the match because the Street Profits are just shouting all the time. At the beginning of the match, it's like all 5 guys, the commentary team, all just talking over each other, and then it's just Street Profits just dominating the whole rest of the way. So I really couldn't focus on the match itself. Bianca wins with the KOD. I will say though, with the Street Profits just yelling the whole time, it was all, we were this close to feeling like, man, it feels like there's actually a crowd there again. In your main event, Drew McIntyre taking on Angel Garza in non-title action. Garza is accompanied by the whole dang crew, but it matters not a whit because Drew single-handedly destroys the entire crew, including a big old plancha to the outside saying, I can do it all. And he hits Garza. He hits Austin Theory on the outside with the Claymore, then hits Angel with the Claymore in the ring to win the matchup, and then afterward hits another one on Garza, another one on Austin Theory, and then McIntyre on the top of the ramp. He almost does like the Shawn Michaels Playgirl pose with the belt and everything. He's doing the Tranquilo pose, but it totally looks like Shawn Michaels Playgirl pose as we cut to black. So yeah, in the last 2 weeks, Drew McIntyre has single-handedly destroyed Zelina Vega's crew. Like, not even close. Not even for a little bit did Andrade and Angel and Austin Theory get a bit of a leg up on Drew McIntyre. Now, Drew looks fucking phenomenal doing this, but I feel really bad for like, Zelina's crew because, I mean, you know, they're gonna hopefully bounce back and like fight other like lesser people on the hierarchy and look good in that way. And you see them throughout the night. Like they, you know, last week they beat up a couple guys, they get stomped by Drew. This week they lose a lot, get beat up a lot. Like we get 1 win from Andrade, but they still get beat up by Drew. So again, like Drew needs to move on though and do something else because we can't have him beating up those guys every single week. It can't be basically a different version of, you know, Andrade and Angel and Rey Mysterio and Humberto Carrillo. We can't be seeing these combinations every single week because it's going to feel like reruns. And right now, with like no crowds and you're just kind of spinning the wheels till Money in the Bank, we can't be having that. My grade for this week's Raw is a C. This one landed somewhere in the middle for me because there were some good points at the show. You know, there were some couple good matches here and there, like the Money in the Bank qualifiers were great. It's good to see like a dominant like babyface champion on the show for the first time in what feels like eons. But there were some clunkers on this show as well. I think that the Lashley the tire thing was weird, but not as badly weird as the Viking Raiders doing their chant driving a car while just wearing like t-shirts with their helmets on while one's eating a big old turkey leg. At least Lashley got to do something kind of on brand, like show his strength and flipping the tire. And again, I have to go back to the thing with, you know, Drew destroying Zelina's crew. Looks great for Drew, but how does the crew look if they can't handle their shit against one guy, even for a minute? But let me know what you thought about this week's Raw in the comment section below, and be sure to give it a letter grade by going to the iCard in the corner of your screen. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.